Hi, welcome to the Village of Buchanan, May 26th workshop meeting. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have a very short agenda this evening. So the first thing on the agenda is AMS acquisitions. They have postponed it. They'll be here next month at our workshop. They wanted to do get some more information together before they come in front of the board again. The next item is discussion on accessory apartments. I know, Sean, you had some things.
Where we had left it was to get comments from the rest of the board members, as well as the building department, and I believe you had said some other people had some comments that they wanted to discuss, so.
Okay. And I think, you know what, Peter is with us this evening, our building inspector. Peter, would you like to start with your comments? Yes, please come out.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good evening, Peter.
After reviewing the village code with accessory apartments, it's a suggestion that we keep the initial transfer of ownership application to the planning board the same. So whether it's a new owner or a family member moving in, there's a 3-year stipulation in the code about having to live on the property for 3 years. But if it's a family transfer, that's pretty much direct in the 3 years. So that's a possible amendment to eliminate that 3-year living at the address at that point, because it's not the same, for a family member purchasing it.
Oh,
They may not have lived there for 3 years.
The code doesn't have a stipulation for family member. It says transfer of ownership must be approved, or if it's not approved, that the tenant has to be vacated within 90 days.
Well, that's that part, but there was a section on that. There's a 3-year minimum live at that residence requirement before you apply to the planning board to have that. After the first application, there was a 1-year reappearance to the village planning board to review what had happened in the past year, whether there were complaints, were there items, and at that point the board would decide if it was a 1, 2, or 3-year renewal process for the special permit. I recommend, it's a suggestion that we eliminate that facet of the law, as New York State requires that the accessory apartment is inspected annually by the building department. So I will be, or the building department will be inspecting these units. If there were to be complaints, issues, neighbor items, I would present that to the board to reassess or evaluate their special permit access. At that point, our code also states after the 1-year reapplication to the planning board, that it's after the 1, 2, or 3-year decision. I suggest we just keep it as a 3-year scenario, because the building department will be inspecting these units annually. It's a New York State requirement. At the end of the 3-year time frame, it becomes the responsibility on the building department to renew that special use permit. At that point, the board, I would imagine, discuss some type of renewal fee scenario for that. And other than that, that's my opinion on how we should handle that.
Okay, so what you're saying is what normally happens now is when the house is sold.
Yes.
And I did see where you said that in C1, the building in which the accessory apartment is constructed shall at least be 10 years old, and the owner applicant shall have occupied the dwelling for at least 3 years prior to the initial application for the special permit for an accessory apartment. So that was what you had looked at.
Yes, I was referring to that section of the code.
So right now, the process is when the house is sold,
Yes.
the new owner could come in, and I'm not sure if that 3-year requirement has been...
I believe maybe they have 90 days. 90 days.
90 days, correct,
come
yeah.
before the board to apply to continue
Okay.
that process.
But doesn't that seem a little contradictory?
Well, that's
It absolutely does, and that's why I wanted to remove it.
right.
Because he has 90 days to come. If he
Okay.
doesn't come, then he has 60 days
To
to remove the
evacuate.
tenant.
Right.
I don't know if anybody's ever tried to remove a tenant, but it's not
not gonna
going to happen in 60 days. And my issue with that clause is that it's going to be prohibitive for somebody to transfer
Right.
their house. If somebody is not going to get the accessory apartment approval, which might be contingent upon the purchase of the house, he'll never be able to transfer. And then he will be in violation of our law because he won't be able to get rid of the tenant. That's why I wanted that taken out.
Well, not necessarily, because when you do a house sale, it can always be contingent, and which I have always done, is always contingent on the tenant not being on the property. So if the seller really wants to sell, they will have that person removed from the property.
Yes.
What is the issue with removing that clause out of the?
The
why
3-year?
keep it? No.
Oh, that they have to be there for 3 years?
The 90 days, the 60?
No, so the clause that we're discussing is that they would have to live on the property for 3 years. So since that's contradictory and there is another way to deal with the issue, the 90 days, I don't see an issue with that.
So if somebody sells their house, they come to the planning board, they say, I'm going to act as the agent for this property owner. They apply to the planning board, and the planning board for some reason says, hey, we're not going to approve that accessory apartment. Now you can't sell that house.
Sure you can.
It says here that the tenant has to be out in 60 days. The planning board refuses to approve that, the tenant's gone. You can't sell that house with that tenant there.
Well, I would imagine that the planning board would have to have a good reason for not renewing that, if there
Well,
were
that's-
issues or perhaps something had happened prior.
That's not if you go by the legislative intent. You see, you guys are skipping the whole thing. The legislative
Well,
intent...
that's why we're here discussing it
the-
this
the
evening, Sean, so
legislative
we can work
intent-
through this.
The legislative intent specifically says it's for residents and families of limited income. So the planning board could say, well, we're determining the limited income to be 60% of the county mean for affordable housing, which part of the legislative intent is to have affordable well, I shouldn't say affordable housing, but to allow the owner occupant some income because they're limited means. So somebody can come and say, well, you're not of limited means, as per our code, we're not going to approve the continuation of an accessory apartment, because that's what the code says.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the biggest problems I had with this whole, basically, this code has been in, part of our code has been in existence since, I think 1989. The one big problem I have with it is the income check on this. I don't think that's appropriate. I think if anything is taken out of here and changed, is the income should be removed. I mean, who are we to judge if somebody qualifies income-wise, and I don't know. Is that the village's business to see somebody's W-2 or see their income tax? So I really think that definitely needs to come out of the accessory unit.
So there are 2 locations in the legislative intent that I propose to have it removed.
Okay. Income verification. Yep. That I think is appropriate to remove that. Wherever that is in here, off the top of my head, I don't have that highlighted right now.
Legislative intent is A,
First one.
under
Okay.
211, TAC 22,
Okay.
Section A. Second line and fourth line, as well as the second line from the bottom of the paragraph.
Okay. How does the rest of the board feel about removing the financial information out of this?
I agree.
I agree.
I agree. I don't think it's our business anyway.
And just to clarify, Peter, currently, out of, how many households do we have here? Approximately 800? Say 800. We currently have 18 accessory units
Yes.
in the village?
Yes.
Okay. So it's a very a minute fraction of our housing stock here.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. Where else do we need to discuss this? You know, my thought was, this has been in effect since approximately 1989. We have no issues with this. The process has been working pretty well. I have never seen an issue with this that I know of. So,
Mayor, we've constantly had issues with accessory apartments. for the last
Accessory
15
apartments,
15
Peter?
or 20 years. Absolutely.
do we have problems with accessory apartments?
This has always been a hot button issue.
Okay.
Because of approvals, complaints by neighbors, accessory apartments trying to be moved to 2 families. You know, we've seen this before.
The accessory apartments that we have that are legal, we have no issues with primarily. It's the few illegal ones that we're trying to find that are the problem. I monitor the ones that are registered with us and approved, again, as an annual inspection. I haven't had any issues with those at all that are current. There are others that may be illegal that those are the ones that we're trying to narrow in on.
Well, the legal ones aren't going to be an issue because they have to be owner occupied.
Yes, right.
And you're not going to have drama in the home you live in. You know, a homeowner isn't going to put up with that. But the problem we really have
Yes.
is with the absentee landlords here in the village.
Yes.
That's a huge problem. And that's a huge problem everywhere because they just don't watch their properties, and it's a problem. Okay. So Sean, you were talking about, what other section was it?
Well, there was section,
6A, was it?
6A.
We're talking about, Sean?
no. Well, yes, we had a 6A. That was the planning board. What I had wanted was to add reasons for the planning board to be able to take into account circumstances for denials of permits. All right? And as well as the building department to refer any denial of a permit back to the planning board. I wanted to have the building department be the authorizing authority instead of having to come to the planning board. So, plan board shall include but not limit the following circumstances. And that was under 6 alpha. I wanted to take out, the board shall also give consideration to the character. I wanted it to say, the planning board shall include but not limit consideration to the following circumstances. Because once you have a set defined list of things, the only things you can look at, I want them to be able to have other things that might not have been envisioned when this code was written. So I wanted to say include but not limited to. That was what I wanted to change in 6A. So where it says planning board shall, I wanted to say the planning board shall include but not limit consideration to the following circumstances and character existing and future uses, so on and so forth. I didn't want to hem in the people who were reviewing the permit.
I think what you're saying is an issue that came up on, in the village. And one of the things that the planning board had to look at were other existing uses in the neighborhood, how many other accessory apartments, how many apartments there were, just the makeup of the street.
I just wanted to give them a little more latitude in their evaluation of the circumstances.
Okay. Okay. And what was the other, I'm sorry, I don't...
Under B, which, where it's a transfer of ownership, the 90 days, I wanted to remove that and say, let's see, the change of ownership, the owner shall apply and shall adhere to all the terms and conditions of the special permit that was issued by the building department or at the request from the building department. So you guys, nobody seemed to want to change that, where it's the This is the sale transfer, the 90 days one. I want to get rid of that because it's prohibitive. I wouldn't want somebody to have to sell their house, be contingent upon the approval of the planning board for an accessory apartment. I just don't think that's fair. And Mr. Cook, you had said, there was a differentiation between families and not families. There's no differentiation in the code. Is that something that you're proposing?
Just with a transfer of ownership, or whether a new owner or a family member to another family member. It's just a transfer of ownership. I'm just taking it as a generic.
All right, because you had mentioned from family to family, it's just really just who's living where. But it doesn't mention family to family. And if we're interpreting this code strictly, the person has to live in that house for, we said 3 years before it can even be approved. So the two terms are contradictory right off the bat. And I don't see how it can be enforced. And we talk about there's not really an issue with the people who are following the law. We should make it easier for people who are following the law and go after the people who are not following the law. If we make this too cumbersome, nobody's going to follow it. And I think this is too cumbersome, this clause.
So then what you're saying, after the change of ownership, then the new owner wouldn't have to appear before the
The
planning?
new owner would be under the same terms and conditions as the previous owner where it comes to the inspection cycles and the movement of the special permit. When you purchased the house, you would already have that special permit in place, and you would follow all of the terms and conditions that were in that special permit. And it would come up under the same inspection criteria as anybody who would have an accessory apartment.
So what if the next item was 2 years from now? That's my only concern is you have a new owner on the property. They haven't been told what the requirements are, but when they come in front of the planning board, they would have to put their application, then they would have a discussion with the planning board, and they would review what's required of them.
And
That's my only...
And that's why further down, I wanted to add a section, and that's why I would want the building inspector to be in charge of this instead of the planning board, because as you know, planning board members cycle through. Not all of them would be here for when the initial permit was issued, for the inspections. They wouldn't be here. The building department would have all of the records readily available. Whenever there would be an issue, they would be notified, and there could be a clause in here to revoke it when there's a violations. What I had proposed in the new paragraph, D2A, is reissuance of the special permit shall be based on but not limited to the following criteria, which would be enforceable by the building department. 2 or more verified complaints of violation of the original terms of the special permit. Primary structure no longer owner occupied. Unauthorized modification of the accessory apartment. More than 1 bedroom. Accessory apartment in state of disrepair, or any other factor as deemed warranted by the building inspector. Then he would pull that, revoke that permit, and send them back to the planning board, because that's the appointed officials would be the final authorizing authority, and he would use this criteria to either revoke it or approve it. So you're giving the change of ownership to people the opportunity for occupying the structure as it was originally intended or as they felt when they were purchasing it, but it gives us an enforcement action to prevent, abuses.
Would it still not, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Murray. My question is, with the building department, you're saying you want the building department to be responsible for rescinding the permit? Would that not be a suggestion of the building department back to the planning board to review what the complaints and issues are or violations?
That's what I said. Yeah, if you revoke it, it goes back.
But
That's why
I'm
you wouldn't be the sole authority. You would
I'm
be.
not provoking it.
No.
Right? I would
No, you'd send them back and say, hey, I'm not recommending this reapproval. These are the reasons, as per our code.
Yep.
I find that this is not a suitable reapplication. You guys be the judge now,
Yes.
because you're the appointed officials, you're the authorizing authority.
I just want to understand.
Yeah, Sean, I think the question when you say he revokes it, he won't revoke it.
No, he's just not gonna approve it, he's gonna go back to them.
I think that was confusing.
Yeah.
That's what I was confused.
Yeah, you won't revoke it, you'll send it back to
Yeah.
the planning board, and the planning board will revoke it if they want.
Okay.
And
Steve?
all special permits transfer upon ownership, is that correct? Or is there any examples where a special permit does not
It
transfer?
depends on the special permit.
Well, that's what I'm, are there examples?
It could be a use special permit, I don't think, I don't know, I don't know what other special.
I don't believe.
Well, we have special permits for business within a structure. We have special permits for transferring firearms. There's all kinds of different special permits. And you'd have to go into the use code and the addendum to see.
So some do transfer with ownership and some do not?
Sure.
I do not believe we have any that transfer over. Each special permit application is its own individual item.
So,
And when the
I mean, that
ownership
would help
transfers-
us, you know,
Yeah,
make a
that's-
decision here.
That's my
If that's-
understanding of the code.
If all special permits
Home
end
occupations.
at the change of
Yes.
ownership,
Yes.
then this should as well.
Yes.
This is a special permit. Or if it doesn't, then it should carry over
Yes.
as any other special
I
permit.
don't believe each special permit has that caveat in there. If you go to the table of bulk regulations, you'll see in the different zones what is allowed by special permit and what is not allowed. I don't believe that when it's transferred that it's automatically revoked. But you'd have to go into the code into each individual section that refers you to the table of bulk regulations. So I don't know if it is or it isn't. But, you know.
All right. Because I know Stephanie is feverishly trying to,
I don't know, just rhyming through my head.
yeah, no, but I know you're writing things down, so we're discussing it this evening just to work through this with the board. Okay. You know, because
I did
to me.
print it out and give it to everybody last month, right?
I know, but it wasn't done like we usually do it, like it goes by the paragraph and, you know, like you had it more abbreviated under section B, whatever. You know, usually we highlight it and then we put in a different color to show the change. So it's easier for everyone to understand what you're looking to do. Okay. Okay. Were those the things that you were,
Well, no, I had written in there an appeal, which is something we just discussed, that if the building department didn't reapprove it, so if the building the inspector has determined that a special permit for accessory apartment should not be reviewed, the owner applicant may appeal the decision to the planning board, to the planning board for their final determination. So that's something we had just talked about, and that was an added paragraph that I wanted in there.
okay. All right. All right. Were those all the items that you were looking?
No, actually, D2.
Okay.
I wanted to read, the initial permit shall be valid for a period of 1 year, at which time the building department will notify the applicant of the expiration of the original special permit, and that the application for the extension from the building department is required. Subsequent thereto, the special permit shall be valid for a period not to exceed 3 years. The exact term is to be determined by the building department. At the end of such period, the building department shall require the owner applicant to renew the permit, or the owner shall notify the building inspector of his intent to discontinue the permit in accordance with the applicable time periods established in section D1. So our code currently puts the onus on the building owners. As you know, no building owner has, in the past, I don't know, since 2005, when I started, has requested an extension or a reapplication, except when the property is transferred. We had discussed on many occasions having a computer program for all of the inspections, that all the properties operate under the special conditions, to be notified of when these inspections are up. As you know, the last couple of years, nobody did it, and everybody was in violation, and that's what started this, because over the past 6 or 7 years, we've been trying to get a handle on the accessory apartments, which has been an issue since I was on the planning board in the beginning, like I said, in 2005, because the code, I feel, is ambiguous and is a little difficult to operate by. So that's why I wanted the building department to be the ones to reach out to these homeowners, as they do with backflow preventers, as they do with trap inspections, as they do with everything that has special permits for the owners of the properties.
So I know we discussed, you're getting a new program
Yes,
for the building
new
department.
software that we're acquiring and will be implementing, there is the ability to add those modules to that as an email reminder to the owner, whatever time frame, we allocate 30, 60, 90 days before the actual inspection time is required, that the software has the ability to do that.
And what about you? It would also
Yes.
pop up to notify
Yes.
the building department?
Yes.
And the other reason why I wanted it to say not to exceed 3 years is because I wanted to give the building department the opportunity to keep a 1-year frequency if there are certain issues that they foresee coming up. If they initially say 3 years and that's it, because that's what the code says. If there's a violation or if there's questionable inspection, they could keep that frequency at 1 year and 1 year and then expand it to a greater interval if they feel that everything is in compliance and then there might not be an issue. Because I'm sure the building inspector knows, even when we used to do site visits, you could see where somebody just took a stove out and said, no, this is where I'm sleeping tonight. You know, I had a very entertaining inspection one time where the guy said, well, this is where I sleep when I come home at night so I don't wake my wife up. And I look in the bedroom, so that's very interesting perfume you have, you know? And he had just taken the stove out. So if that were to occur, you could say, hey, your second inspection is going to be a year, not 3 years, because the code says the first one is 1 year and then 3 years. So it gives them an opportunity to stay on top of stuff.
To clarify, I think renewal and inspection keep getting confused. There's an annual inspection. that's
Required by New York State.
So my suggestion was a 3-year renewal timeframe, which was the maximum that the planning board was allowed to give after the 1 year. And in that 3-year timeframe, I will have already been there 3 times. And if there are any issues, again, as Sean was saying, that is an annual inspection, and, the New York State requirement.
And if there's an issue during that annual
Yes.
inspection, it could be referred back to the
Be
planning
referred
board
right
and
back-
addressed
exactly,
at that
and then
time.
you could discuss that.
You just said you don't revoke the permit.
I don't revoke it. I said I
Okay.
suggest that there's an issue, and then you would have to decide what to do with that.
So can the planning board revoke a permit?
Is that what
The
planning
court
board
has to
wants
revoke
do
the
it.
permit, not the planning board, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought it was a
If you-
special use permit. I thought it was a village requirement. Why is it a court issue?
Then you don't reissue.
That we don't reissue, yeah. But
I'm
would they
seeing
not?
in here, it says a special permit shall be valid for a period not to exceed 3 years. It says not to exceed 3 years.
Yeah, not to exceed 3 years. I didn't.
Sean's suggesting making it, yeah, his
One-
1 year,
Oh,
2 year.
I'm talking renewal. Renewal time is the inspection. There's-
Yeah, the inspection we got,
inspection's
that's every year, that's,
annual. But the renewal
that's fine.
is my
Renewal
question.
staying at not to exceed, giving him not to.
I want him to have the ability to not renew a permit if the property has been in violation or appears to be.
I think what Stephanie is asking is, I want to clarify that your suggestion is there'll be no 3-year renewal.
No, it's gotta be up to the building inspector if it's 3 years, not the planning board. Because the planning board is not gonna have the complaints, the planning board's not gonna have the inspections, the planning board is not gonna have the neighbors coming in and telling them, why is this going on? The building department will. So they will be the ones with the most knowledge, they'll have the files, they'll have the computer programming, they are the best people to make that decision. If they don't agree with that, giving them that renewal, then it goes to the planning board, and the building department can testify as to why he doesn't think so, and the neighbor, everybody can come in and discuss it.
Okay, so the renewal process takes place.
That's what, I'm just talking about renewals.
Gotcha, okay.
You know, obviously inspections are gonna have to be rectified for continuation of the permits.
Got it, okay. Yep.
Okay. So, any other board members have anything? Because we've discussed a lot here, and we were kind of all in different sections. Sean, is there some way to clarify everything? Would you be able to look at the code, cross out the areas, or put change, how you want to change it, and then, this way the board, it's easier for them to compare everything?
Sure, absolutely.
And that would be good. And then we could send that to the board and have them review it. And we can go from, there's, like I said, there's definitely the financial thing I want to remove out of there. I just, once again, I know this process has worked for quite some time. It's not like we have 800 affordable housing units and 800 accessory apartments. Let me clarify that. I don't know what's going to happen with the ADU law next year, but that's something we will, I understand it's been tabled for this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if that comes up again, the accessory dwelling unit.
Well,
law.
the ADU law was taken out of the budget, and I believe it's still in committee.
Yeah, yeah.
So it hasn't been taken off the table. It's still in committee to be
It's
discussed.
still in limbo. It's in limbo right now.
I'm sorry,
but that
Marcus,
can
you have
come
something to
off.
say?
Yeah, I wanted to also update the board that the county is actually looking at accessory units to make it legal in the county. So just to give you some information, because I attended a meeting where the county expressed they want to do AUD accessory units throughout the county. In fact, Linda Whitehouse is the attorney for Hastings. So they actually did a little summary, little review that they're recommending them to be put out throughout the county. Some things that concerned me was that they're not taking parking in consideration. The accessory unit can be put in any district within any community, and no parking is required as part of that. There's a whole bunch of limitations on it. As soon as I get the video from that meeting, I'll forward to the board
Please,
as well,
yeah.
so you know. So you got the state level, and now they got the county who's pushing it as well. So
Well, is the county suggesting draft legislation, or are they suggesting to usurp our zoning authority?
they're as everybody knows, remember the model ordinance that
Yes.
they were pushing it? They're going to be required as part of the model ordinance. We never accepted the model
Well,
ordinance.
we're not required to follow a model
No.
ordinance
That's correct.
No.
unless they usurp our zoning.
That's correct. They're not pushing that yet. They're
All right.
pushing it as part of the model ordinance, but they're recommending that every community consider it, in case there's concern of higher level coming down to the communities that do not do it. So just want to let you know, that's the meeting that I had. I'll forward it to video.
Yeah, please, I'd like to see that. I think we all would. So when we're referencing the accessory dwelling unit, we've discussed this before, but, for the people that haven't heard about it, it's a proposed state law that would really eliminate our zoning, and the state would override our zoning. So right now, we have accessory apartments. We have that in our code that we allow, like an accessory apartment to a home. But the state would basically, it says that every unit, every home could have an additional apartment in it. And so looking at our stock, and it just has a whole mess of different things. Marcus had mentioned about parking. So consider we have 800 homes here. If everyone did that, we could potentially have more than double our population here. So we're approximately 2,300. So suddenly we're looking at 4,600 residents. So we have to supply services. So what would happen, it would be in the framework of the already existing property. So there would be no more taxes coming in. So now you have 4,600 people. You have to supply police, the highway, the garbage services. So I've been told it works in California, but we all know what a mess California is. So I'm like, that's nice, glad it's working for them, but, I think every community should be able to decide how to run their communities, and this would definitely eliminate that, and I think it would cause more of a problem. So they're trying to kill suburbia. That's probably the bottom line to the whole thing. So that legislation is not moving forward this year, but don't be surprised if it comes back next year. And we have already sent a letter. Senator Harkam was one of the sponsors of that bill. The board has sent a letter that we are not interested in that. I've told Senator Harkam directly that that is not good for our community, and we would not be supporting it.
So I just have one question, Mary. Do you have any questions on what I spoke about, or any suggestions to change this, or how do you feel about my modifications to the code, or my requested modifications?
I'd like to review it, but one thing I had said already that this has been working for the village. We have 18 units. This is not like we're dealing with a substantial amount of units. I and the building inspector have not seen, and I'm sorry I'm speaking for you, have not seen any major issues with this. The other thing that I really would like to take out would be the financial, as I said before, the financial part to it, because I just don't think it's important. with this, and I don't think, as Anthony Capicati said, I don't think it's really any of our business what somebody's financial situation is. But once this is all typed up, I'd like to also have the time to review it again. Okay. Any other comments from the board? All right, thank you. Marcus, on the meetings and the taping of the meetings?
Oh, yeah, wanted to ask the board, now that we're at live meetings again, the way it used to be before COVID, the members who used to be here before COVID, we never taped the workshops, the planning board and zoning board meetings. So I wanted to find out if the board wants to go back to that. Do you want to end the hybrid meetings, stop the Zoom meetings? So I'm trying to find out what we can do. We continue doing Zoom, but then we got to talk about one of the items here about the open meetings law. If you want to continue Zoom, but we went back to the way we were. We don't have to take those meetings, and we don't have to worry about this legislation that we're talking about video conferencing. So now with technology out there and what happened with COVID, I want to find out if we want to go back to the way we were.
Are we going back to normal, or?
Yeah, so that's something, first to talk with then Mike Minor and Justin, who takes these meetings out, determine what they want to do. So I want to make sure we get on the same page and see what the board would like to do with that.
Okay. I think you had mentioned the other day the zoning board, was it the zoning board minute was all of 15 minutes?
The last planning board meeting
Planning
was
board,
like
15 minutes.
Yes.
And we pay $450 for each meeting, regardless of the time.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, we had discussed this when we talked about authorizing the contract for the videotaping. And we said we were going to get rid of the planning and zoning board, that we were going to keep the village board meetings, and there was some discussion as to whether to keep the workshop meetings. And I had suggested keeping the workshop meetings because we changed the way we did minutes. We used to do minutes verbatim for workshop, even though we didn't have it taped. And it's very hard now with this different synopsis of our minutes, which we currently, you just get a synopsis of what's going on. You don't get the flow of the meeting. And if we're not going to get the flow of the meeting or be able to remember exactly what transpired or who said what, we were going to get into a he said, she said thing. And if we can't go back to the videotape, we're not really going to have an accurate recording of the meeting, even though we are within the open meetings law where it comes to minutes, because all of our expenditures and all of our decisions are encapsulated, but you could have an hour and a half discussion with a one paragraph and a resolution. So I had kind of have an issue with that aspect of it.
Okay, so what,
So we can tape or record the workshops and keep that as a as an audio recording, or we can use Zoom to record it. So we have options on what you want to do with that, but we're definitely going to now do the planning and zoning board meetings so we can take care of that first.
I don't see why we have to, well, we've never had them taped before.
Okay.
And the meeting minutes of the zoning and planning boards were always small.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. So we can do that, and then regarding the workshops, we can continue with Zoom. If you record it, which is being recorded right now, audio and video, or we can just do a audio recording of the workshops. So it depends.
I don't want to have just audio. You know, how hard would that be if we have a 2-hour audio,
Correct.
and then you got to find something in an hour and 50 minutes? How are you going to remember that? You know?
No, we can do Zoom, so we can record it.
I don't know, what do the rest of the board members
No,
think?
yeah.
You know?
So it depends what the board members.
I am for eliminating the planning and zoning board, the taping of that. Marcus, I'll tell you what happened years ago, what we used to do with the workshop. I know why we didn't record the workshop, because we felt then people would be more comfortable if they had an issue coming to the board to discuss things and they weren't on TV. So that's why we did that years ago. And then COVID came along, changed everyone's world, and everything was taped at that point. So, I understand both sides of the issues. And the Zoom, we'd be able to at least, I don't know. It's up to the board. I could go either way with that. It's whatever they're comfortable with.
I would say do away with the planning board and the zoning board and go forward with the workshop and the meetings.
Okay, so tape both workshop and the regular board meeting. Okay,
Yeah, I agree with that.
okay,
I agree.
okay. All right, so that answers that.
Didn't we have this discussion last year?
at some point, but now
We
things
had it when we were
changed.
discussing authorizing a contract.
Yeah, it was his budget.
Yes,
Yeah.
because we changed, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because the prices had changed, and we wanted to save a little bit of money,
Yeah.
so we did discuss this.
And then COVID was we still had the active, and then we still had the opportunity to do the Zoom meetings and different things like that. So now I think we're almost back to normal, whatever normal is anymore, I don't know.
Okay, so the workshop will continue the way we're doing it right now with Zoom.
Yes.
Which will be recorded and it'll be taped. and-
Okay, all right, all right.
Perfect, thank you.
Peter, I'm sorry, I left you standing there. I apologize. Was there something else you,
I just want to make sure. Thank
Sorry.
you so very much.
sorry.
Thank you, Peter.
Peter, don't go anywhere yet.
Oh, yes. If you could stay with us.
For a few minutes.
Thank you. All right, perfect. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, when you come to meetings, please sit at the table with us. Thank you. Okay, do we have any other comments, anything from the board?
Just one thing,
Any
Mayor.
other? Sure.
Yeah, when we're talking about the AMS, and we had requested a lot of information from them before. Do you know if they're going to bring it back, what we asked for? You know, we had asked for,
Oh, yes.
you know, a cost-benefit analysis. We asked for a valuation between services and taxes. We wanted to know about the steep slope encroachment. And one thing I didn't ask them at the time was, I still see that there's a for sale sign on that property. I know that one of the property owners had sold it several months ago, actually probably last year. Is the transfer, the sale of this property contingent upon this approval, or are these people acting as the agent of the owners? Because we didn't get that letter. So
Yeah, I think they're a contract vendee, so
Okay.
according to if they get their approvals, then they'll purchase
So
the property.
don't they need a letter before us to say they're acting as the agent of the owner before we can even hear them?
From the owner authorizing.
Them to
Okay,
do that.
Okay.
You know?
all right.
So,
Mhm.
and also, a couple other things. Do we have an update from General Code? Or the rest of the board members have a chance to review the changes? I know it was last year, and we said we were gonna have to do it by March or something, or wasn't there? So it's been over a year for the General Code. We paid the money for it.
Yep.
We had a draft copy of all the changes, and it seems to be in limbo. So I was wondering where
It
that
is indeed. So we have to, plus I have 2 new board members here. So we'll see what hasn't been addressed yet, move forward. We have been quite busy. There's been a lot going on here. Holtec, IMA with the town of Cortland. I don't know, I can go on and on. So I guess that fell by the wayside. So we will pick that back up and move forward with that again.
Send a copy of that to you guys.
Please, thank you.
Also, the final draft of the LWRP, we're supposed to be approving that in the near future. Have the other board members, or I know I had made a lot of comments to Nick, and I didn't see a revision of the draft. I know it was presented, the draft was presented last week or 2 weeks ago. There was a public hearing on that. So in order for us to apply for what I understand, grants and whatnot around our waterfront, it's advantageous to have us approve it. And part of that resolution is that we have to approve the issuance and we have to follow the LWRP. So what's the status of that?
I was at the meeting, the last meeting. I was there. There were some more suggestions. They had the maps out. And then there were a few presentations at the end. We went to the back of the room, and there were some comments made. I know Nick was there, and he said he will be at the June 7th meeting to go over that. I thought he'd be here tonight. He had mentioned he might be here tonight to discuss that, but he will definitely be at the June 7th meeting to go over that.
Would it be
the
more
LWRP.
appropriate for him to be at a workshop meeting than a regular meeting? Is it June 7th?
I
or
don't,
regular board
yeah, he
meeting?
can come again, but I think it was just to review what happened at that meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just for everybody's information, the LWRP is on the website, so you can, for the new board members, everyone looks at it, you can read it over, everything should be on there, so we can catch up a little bit what's going on. And I think they'll have another public meeting for comments, so we're going to come back and then they'll get.
Yeah, some of them things should be removed. They even talks about the billboards that we had removed in 2012. So, you know, I'm kind of curious as to where they got their research information, but. Also, I see we have an executive session. I'd like to discuss the PBA negotiations.
That's going to be an exec.
I didn't see it on my agenda. Was there a revised agenda?
Okay. When we go into exec, it will be to discuss personnel, and that was one of the things I had.
It was on email, wasn't it?
I had asked Marcus
Well,
to
the
be
email
prepared
was
to
from the
review
negotiator
it.
and what he wanted to discuss. I had emailed back that the majority of the stuff on there was not what we discussed. So it was his contention that that's what we talked about, but I have the notes from that meeting and I have some emails, so I'd like to be able to discuss that a little.
Sure.
I wonder if have you guys been able to give your comments to anybody about what you'd like to see in a contract?
That's why we were going to discuss it this evening. I told Marcus to be prepared to do an overview for them, so, because they're new on the board, and they're youngins yet, so this is their first contract, so I wanted them to be able to be comfortable with the process.
Also, down in the office, there was a petition for, could you explain that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. I am on the New York State Decommissioning Task Force. The task force is comprised of local elected officials and also people who are experts in their field. What was happening, I call him Dr. Still, Supervisor Becker had recommended that perhaps some other people would be on the board. And I felt, and so did the people that signed the petition, felt that if anyone else was added onto the board, that they would be experts in either nuclear decommissioning, or they would be experts in demolition, construction demolition. So yes, I definitely spearheaded that. I know you have spearheaded some other petitions that went around the village, but this had nothing to do with politics. This was what was the composition of the board, the task force.
When I came in to sign the bills, I didn't know what it was about.
But I didn't, I didn't feel it appropriate that you went out to get petitions because you work for Holtec. I just felt that it would be I felt it would be a conflict. Well, if you had gone out and gotten petitions for this that said what the composition of the decommissioning task force was, I think it could be looked upon that you were an employee of Holtec and why you're getting those petitions. That's all.
I just didn't know what it was about.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, that's all it was. And if you read it, it specifically spelled that out, what it was.
Well, it said that you didn't want to have people added to it, and I just didn't understand who you didn't want.
Well, you've been on the
to be put it.
decommissioning, on some of the meetings with the decommissioning, the state
The last one
decommissioning
was in
oversight board.
October,
Yeah. Then the last one was last Thursday.
I wasn't on that one.
Yeah, it was a nice 4-hour meeting, yeah.
I was at work. I
Yeah.
was on the casks.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's, they're going to start movement again. Can you talk about that?
No, I
Okay.
can't talk about that.
Okay,
You
all right.
can talk to the public relations.
Yeah, I think,
They'd let you know.
in August, they'll be moving some more spent fuel cask onto the pads. So I'll give you an update of the meeting at the June 7th meeting. Okay. Anyone else would like to have a comment, question?
Got a hand raised.
You got a hand raised, okay. Oh, it's Eileen.
Sorry, Eileen.
Good evening. I was just curious, is Bob Wheeler's last day on Thursday?
Yes, it is. I was going to mention that, yeah. Yes, Bob has been with us over 20 years, so this is his last meeting as our highway foreman. I'm sure he'll be here as a Buchanan resident, because he just loves these meetings. And I want to thank Bob, we all want to thank Bob for your dedication for the last, was it 22 years? 26. Wow. So, good job. You did a good job for the village, Bob, and we appreciate it, definitely. And, wow. So we have another retiree, and I hope you can come to the June 7th meeting. So it's your last meeting as the official. Yeah, you'll probably golf in that day, right? So thank you, Bob. We appreciate it. Thanks, Eileen. You beat me to it.
That wasn't totally the point I was making.
Oh, okay.
Aside from thanking Bob for his service, how is the highway department and all that he accomplished and all that he has done and is required to do? Who is taking his place, or who is the interim during the summertime, and what is the hiring situation going? Where is that going?
We have someone from the highway department who will be replacing Bob temporarily. There are interviews scheduled for a new highway supervisor next week, as a matter of fact. The person that's taking over is Scoot Horton. Sorry, Scott Horton. Scoot Horton. Well, everybody knows him by Scoot anyhow. So Scoot has taken over before, and he knows what's required. We will miss Bob, but good for him. He can retire and hang out on the golf course all day. We're jealous. So the interviews are scheduled for next week.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So we're going to be having an executive session. If there is anyone else that would like to speak, please come up to the microphone. If not,
Come on up.
How are you? My name is Mario Velez, and I've spoken to a few people, and my wife is here, Patricia. We have a limousine company here in the area. It's actually located in Montrose, and we're currently looking at a building right across the street from here, actually, 182 Lindsay Avenue, and it's. My concern is pretty simple. I've been working with Bill Shunk, who's here as well, trying to see if there's a possible way that we can possibly purchase the property and move our business there. It's a family-owned limousine business. We're in business for 8 years. We have a good reputation in the industry. We're 5-star rated. We have no issues. And one of the concerns that I've come across is that although it's zoned commercial, that for some reason limousines won't be allowed to park there, which I don't understand 100%. I do understand it's zoned commercial, and I've been told that although it's zoned commercial, it's somewhat retail. And there is a schedule for what's allowed and what's not allowed. It doesn't mention anything about limousines. Doesn't mention anything about that. I've spoken to several people about it. Everyone seems to be welcoming the idea, considering that the location has been dormant for I don't know how many years. We would bring, obviously, revenue. We would liven up that circle there. And again, it's just family-owned limousine business, and we provide transportation for whatever it is that anyone needs transportation for, whether it be weddings, airports, nights out, proms, doctor's appointments, anything like that. So again, I've been working with Bill on this, several months already now, and we're trying to figure out how we can somehow make this work, of course, with the village and their permission, but that's where we are right now. It's almost kind of at a standstill. I don't want to proceed and waste anyone's time or anyone's money if it's not going to be allowed. But I just have a hard time understanding why it wouldn't be welcomed. If you look around the immediate area, you'll see commercial vehicles parked at certain locations, and we would just be parking our vehicles there or having our office there. Pretty simple. It's really nothing any more than that. It's not like we're going to be doing any body work there, any mechanical work there. The vehicles would just be parked there. Drivers will come, pick up the vehicles, go on their assignments, come back, park the vehicles, and go home. Again, as I mentioned, we'd have our office there. And I guess that's it. It's pretty.
Is that the
pretty simple.
Casabella property?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
So it hasn't been vacant for years, it's only been about...
I'm sorry?
It hasn't been vacant for years. It's only been about 9 months, 8 months.
Yeah.
So, Peter, this is the reason why I asked you to stay. Could you explain to Mr. Velez
I believe I already did explain it to Mr.
well,
Velez
could
on
you
the
explain
phone.
it again one more time, please?
Yeah,
It's not zoned, basically retail sales and rentals.
Mike, get the mic.
It's zoned for retail sales and rentals, that's what the requirements were. It doesn't mention anything in the permitted uses for storing of vehicles, of that parking of vehicles overnight, retail sales, pizza businesses, doctor's office, lawyer's office, it was retail sales and rentals. It doesn't specifically say commercial usage for storage of a limousine company. It doesn't say it. So,
it doesn't say it doesn't. It's
but again, it
zoned
doesn't
commercial.
say it. But it does. It's zone commercial for retail sales and those permitted uses, not your use. So the law would have to be changed for you.
Was the previous owner allowed to park commercial vehicles there?
He had maybe one vehicle there or two. I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
A few months ago, actually last year, I brought up this exact problem with our table of bulk regulations. Our table of bulk regulations gives uses that are postulated right now. It also says in the table of bulk regulations, any use not specifically stated in this table is deemed as prohibited. So I wanted that removed and have language in there that says anything not on this table can go for a special use permit, because we can't postulate every use. This came up on Greentown Road when we had the bio company that wanted to come in there. We had many different uses for different sections of property, but they are prohibited because they're not listed on our table of bulk regulations. That is the reason why. Because that's what our code says. If we could change that code, we can issue special permits for just exactly your use, exactly the biotech company's use, and there's many other people that fall into your category. If that code is not changed, the use of that code is not changed, then your only other option is to petition the village board to make limousine services in that zone a use by special permit. That is the only other option. Okay, so we either change the usage of the table or include your usage on our table of bulk regulations under a special permit. So that's the issue. The reason that you can't give you it right now because our code says we can't, because it's not listed. Even though it is commercial, we could say, you know, limousines can be used in C1, C2. We could say that that'd be fine, but it doesn't say that now. It says that your use is prohibited because it's not on that table of bulk regulations. That's it in a nutshell.
So Stephanie, even if the board would entertain that, there's a process that has to be followed, correct?
On your own motion, you would entertain it, or you would, or
He-
the applicant would ask?
The applicant would have to. But that's not something that happens within 30 days. It's a
No,
process.
it's a minimum 90
Yeah.
to 120 days, because you
If
need
not
to
more.
have the resolution authorized by the board, which is 30 days. Then you'd have to have a publication of a public hearing for another 30 days. Then you would vote on it 30 days after that, and then you would have to use that law to come to the planning board and start that whole process over. Where if we were to change the usage of that table, it would be 90 days.
I understand all of that, and honestly, it just sounds like a lot of work that probably, whether or not it would get approved, I have no idea, but I just get completely confused when you look in the immediate area. There are commercial vehicles parked all over in the immediate area, and I'm not mentioning any names, but in the immediate area, and I would be right there, and for some reason, that's not allowed. It just,
Well, the
it doesn't, it really doesn't, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I understand what you're telling me about the schedule. I understand what you're telling me about the petition. I understand about making a motion. I understand all of that. But as it is right now, the way it is right now, really doesn't make any sense because it almost seems arbitrary. And it really doesn't make any sense how in the immediate area you have commercial vehicles that are parked overnight with no problem whatsoever. And then in that area, it's a problem. It's a problem. And it just, to me, it doesn't make sense. I'll talk to my wife. We'll go over it. We'll consider it. But none of it makes sense. I have to tell you, it doesn't make sense, especially, excuse me one second, especially for a piece of property that's been sitting there, as you say, 8 months. I thought it was at least a year, maybe longer, maybe shorter. But it's been sitting there, no business whatsoever. The circle has absolutely no activity at all whatsoever. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. We'll speak about it, and if we decide we want to move forward, I'll be in touch with Bill. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, but other than that, I appreciate it. But again, it just, none of it makes sense from what I'm seeing right in the immediate area. Thank you.
I'm Bill Shunk. I'm the realtor that's listing the property. I do believe that you can have professional offices in that location. I'm not sure what the definition of a professional office space is. I assume that would be a physician, dentist, but am I right? They could have a professional office there? So is his business not a professional office? Is it the vehicles that's the problem? If he didn't park his vehicles there?
It's the use. It's the business use. If you look at the table of bulk regulations, it gives examples of that use. Okay? Some of the commercial vehicles that are parked in that area are for the use of that approved business in that area. There are other commercial vehicles that I'm sure Mr. Velez is aware are being parked there that are not for that use. So it is true that the enforcement is not 100%. And I agree with him that it can be viewed as arbitrary. That's why I want that to be removed, to stop it from being arbitrary, to allow any use as long as it's deemed suitable for the premises. So according to what kind of business would be in there would lend itself to what kind of parking would be required, what kind of, there's a bunch of different things that come into that table of bulk regulations. But it's not that it's professional, not that it's a car being parked, but the business use itself of a limousine company is not listed there. Now, you could split hairs and try to interpret it and say, hey, this is his offices for transportation services, which includes limousines, but includes different businesses in different locations, and say that this is just for the business. But if the building department interprets the code the way the code is written, it's somewhat prohibited. But if we can remove that part of the code that says it's not, it can be done by a special permit and not specifically prohibited, that would work. But I understand how you're trying to interpret it, and that's a legal interpretation.
Well, thank you, Sean. So how does he go about, what's the next step? He's
last year I tried to get that section changed to be able to use that, to take that out where it says anything not listed on this table is deemed prohibited. I would like that removed, and it says anything not listed on this will go for special use permits if deemed acceptable for the area, because you can't postulate everything.
So, and I agree with what you said. So is that something that he can initiate? Does he have to hire an attorney to start that process? Can he make an application to start that process, or do you guys have to do that and he really has no say-so?
It'd be up to the mayor and the attorney how you want to proceed.
Okay.
Well, it's not the mayor that makes all the decisions, it's a board
Well, you
decision.
direct the workforce, Mayor.
It's the
So
it's
if you
the board
direct
decision.
Stephanie to write draft legislation, I can't tell Stephanie to write draft legislation.
Right. So, Mario, I'd like to still ask you a question.
And I have another question.
Okay.
Relating to
All right.
Go ahead.
So, tell us the business you're running. You're talking that it's just an office there. So, you told me, I did speak to you.
Correct.
You told me that how many vehicles were you going to park there and what they were?
Right now, most of you may have seen them. They're parked right next to Premier Athletic Club. We have a 24-passenger bus, a 22-passenger Escalade, and a 8-passenger stretch regular limousine. As of now, that's what's parked there. If we were granted this here, we would just put maybe 2 other vehicles there, and that would be it.
So you'd have 3 vehicles on the property?
Correct.
5, if 5, if you add the additional 2.
It depends if I want most 5, let's say.
All right.
Let's say.
So your operation, your hours of operation. So you have the office, it's 9 to 5, like an office type thing. So what about the vehicles? Like, do they do runs to the airport? Do they,
Well,
you have weddings late at night that come in? You know, that's,
That's
just trying to understand.
That's exactly where I was going to go. Of course, we provide airport transportation on a daily basis. The vehicles go out and they provide, and then they come back. Right now, the airport cars are not parked at my office, they're actually parked in my residence. Those are the ones that are constantly moving on a daily basis. The larger vehicles, for the most part, move towards the end of the week, on the weekends for weddings and other big events. When they are done, they come back, and for the most part, I would say 95% of the times they come back at a reasonable time, late afternoon, 5, 6, 7, early evening. Maybe once in a while, late at night, 9, I don't know if that's late at night, 9, 10. They don't make any noises. That's really it. You know, we would have our office, our operating hours are 9 to 6, 9 to 7. That's when we answer the phones, although people call at 4 o'clock in the morning to make a reservation for 5, but I don't know why that is. But for the most part, it is really just those 3 vehicles that would be parked there. My question was when you, Mr. Murray, were talking about a special use. What exactly? And I want to be a very good idea as to what it is. But if I do apply for a special use, is that a temporary special use? And do you dictate to me exactly what I would be allowed to do?
That would be up to the planning board. The first step would be to allow you to apply to the planning board. Currently, you can't even put an application in because your use is illegal. So we would have to change the law, and then you'd have to meet the criteria set forth, like your lot coverage, you know, hours of operation. If there's different things that come into a special use permit. And one of the things that is a little bit concerning with that property is that there's an easement in the back to grant. If you look on the prints for what was approved in 2006 or 2007, when the building was actually built, you can't have permanently parked vehicles all the way to the south. Where that neighbor's driveway is, if you look on a print, they have to have access to their property. So there was 2 different plans that were submitted, and the right one is in the file now.
Yeah,
So
I know about that
Yeah.
driveway. The way I envision it, that's fine, because it would be for the residents that live upstairs as well.
yeah.
My vision is for the other side.
Yeah. And also, the previous owner had applied to the planning board to build a garage in that area. He was denied because he was already over his lot coverage. But if I'm not mistaken, that property is included in the overlay district, which changes the lot coverage calculation, which would allow you to even make your parking lot bigger. But it doesn't, it's not in that?
Overlay district, though.
Say again?
The overlay district's on the other side.
I could have sworn we incled that.
I don't think so, but I can double check. The map I saw was not included.
I didn't think the okay, well, all right, because I could swear that was one of my sticking points before I came on the board as the planning board chairman, that we wanted to have that on there to allow him to increase his business.
I was also, because I've done my homework and I was under that assumption as well.
That's what I thought. Well, you'll have to look on well, it's all right. All the properties are listed in the legislation. If that one slipped through, we can revisit that. It shouldn't be that difficult to add. What we'd have to do is change a map. We wouldn't need a seeker or anything. But we'd have to verify that you would be allowed the increased lot coverage.
Sean, when we're selling the property, we tell everybody that there's an easement there. Do you know, is it a perpetual easement?
Yes, because we can't prevent access to a guy's property. He has to be allowed to park on his property. So if I'm not mistaken, that's in perpetuity.
I was told that it ended with the sale of the property, and I wasn't sure about that.
Well, how's the guy gonna get to his house? Where's he gonna park his car?
I just-
It's on the print, it's on the site,
Perpetual or it's not.
it's on the site plan approval of that property.
And so to be clear, are you referring to parking on the property once they go up that little driveway?
If you were to park all your cars in that, I think we're getting outside of the
Yeah, I think
well,
we're-
we're getting outside of the purview here. We can talk about it later when we have the plans together, but.
Well, that honestly will determine on.
Well, you sit down with him because that was part of the site plan approval. That was a requirement of the approval to build that structure. So you can't get away, you can't remove an easement, which was contingent upon, the building was contingent upon that. So you're gonna have to verify. I couldn't postulate us approving anything that would take away a property owner's access to his property. I don't even think that's legal.
I wouldn't think so either. Did you have any more questions, ma'am, about the business?
Yeah, I just, you know, I've talked to you, I've thought about it. I just, to me personally, you know, you told me what the vehicles were going to be parked there. You know, if you buy the building, you've got two people that live upstairs.
Correct.
So my big concern was, you know, the hours of operation. So if you have a party bus that comes in at 1 o'clock in the morning, you have another thing, you know, it's not fair to the people that live there. Plus, the house you're talking about with the driveway, they have a newborn baby. So it's just like, you know, that's why it was kind of set up as more of a retail operation.
But because of the service that the vehicles provide doesn't necessarily mean that the actual party of the
No, they
client
won't be there, of
will
course.
be occurring at the parking lot.
I realize that, but if you come in at 2 in the morning, or if you have to
Like
do
any other vehicle
an
or-
airport run, you
It'll be
know,
like any other vehicle or any other commercial vehicle traveling up and down the road or parking across the street or anywhere else.
all right, that was just,
Those
I'm just
vehicles are
telling you what my concern is
I
over that.
understand,
You know, I'm
100%.
just,
I understand.
You
but
know.
Those vehicles are not any louder than, as a matter of fact, they're actually quieter than the commercial vehicles that are immediately in the area.
and I was concerned that if it's an airport run, usually the overseas flights come in very early in the morning, and, you know, would a vehicle be running there making noise? Those were just my concerns with a limousine company
No.
being there.
Yeah, I understand, but that's not how I operate. I'm not a taxi company. Taxi companies do that. I don't operate that way.
Just to clarify one thing when it comes to special permits and as-of-right use. When you create an as-of-right use in our table of bulk regulations, that as-of-right use applies to every property in that zone. Special permit would be a permit specifically allowed in that zone, which would have to meet special conditions. So that's the reason why I'm more on the side of a special use permit, because I don't want every property in the zone to be able to have the exact use that you're asking for. We wouldn't want to have limousine services all over. And some of the properties wouldn't be conducive to it, some of the properties would. So a special use permit would take all of that into account. That's why we have different things.
I just have one more question.
Sure.
And I know that you mentioned retail, that it's allowed for retail, but if I were a pizza owner and I opened up a pizza shop there and I just happened to have the best pizza in Westchester County and I was very busy and I decided to keep my pizzeria open till 10 o'clock, maybe even 11 o'clock, because I'm allowed to, how would that be a problem? If I had all my customers coming in for pizza?
I would have to read the code. I don't know, you know.
I was just bringing it up.
No, because there has been a pizza shop there. There's been pizza shops across the street where the gym is now. It used to be a farm.
Yeah,
There's
no,
been
no,
multiple uses, you know.
I understand that, but if I just happened to have the best pizza in Westchester and I was very busy and I had people coming into the parking lot, 9:30, 10:30, I was just bringing up a point.
More power to it. As long as you meet the noise requirements, you'll be fine. 85 decibels.
You have kids at a pizzeria? Thank you.
Steph, I just wanted to ask you a question. So would that be spot zoning if we changed, I know Sean's talking special permit, but, so if it's within that area, would that be spot zoning, allowing something that's in, say, for example, a C1, you're allowing that?
You can, if you want to offer a special use, if you look at our districts, C1, C2,
Mhm.
and then they'll say by special permit use, and it'll list those. That's
Okay.
what Sean is talking about.
Okay.
He knows one of the permitted uses by special permit in that particular district.
Okay.
You see it in the code. So no, we're not talking about one property only.
And when you issue a special permit, the code
Right.
talks about the things that you take into consideration for approval or disapproval. You can't act arbitrarily or capriciously, because that's illegal. So, for everything that we have decision-making in, our code has criteria which are set forth for you to follow it, so you're not being arbitrary. So, revenue generation, traffic, all kinds of things could be taken into consideration. And if it is not deemed a benefit for the village, the special permit wouldn't be granted. Whereas, if it was as of right use, none of that could be taken into consideration. You have the right to do whatever you want as long as you follow what the building codes are. So that's where there's a difference. And that is why the code was written the way it is, to say anything that is not specifically stated, which means evaluated as being beneficial, anything not stated is prohibited, because they couldn't envision it. And nobody can envision it. That's why you need the latitude to be able to make these types of decisions.
So if I could just say something, I'd like to see Mario get this. I'd like to see him buy the building. I don't know where it goes from here, so I'm switching gears slightly. I have another buyer. I'd rather see it go to him. But what about a veterinarian's office?
I don't know what the, I don't remember what everything in the code
Isn't that a
says,
professional
so.
office?
We'd have to
Is
look
that
at the
different
table
than
of bulk
Is that
regulations.
different than a dentist office or a doctor's office?
Yes, it is.
Could you help me
Consider-
with that?
yeah, I'll explain.
Well, listen, we can go offline with that, because we're kind of getting out of the purview.
Well, I'm actually here
Yeah,
for two reasons.
okay.
Mario is one. The other one is I have somebody that would like to make an offer, but not if he can't have his veterinarian's business there.
You got to talk to the building department.
I don't know what it says.
You have to talk to the building department.
I've already
Yes.
discussed with the person you're referencing. I've already discussed this with them in great detail.
Okay. And it's not permitted?
Not by the way the code is written, no.
So it's
And
not
New York
considered-
State's definition of a professional office.
So that's it, it's not a professional office.
It's a professional, but there's animal care, there's a lot of details. I don't know if we're
Right.
talking about that right now.
But you could show me, we don't have to do this now.
Talk to the building department.
You could show me someplace where it says that's prohibited?
I could explain the use.
When he comes in, just
Yes, we'll-
print out the law, print out the state's uses,
Mm.
print out what our code says, compare it to, and that's how the determination
Yeah.
will be made. We can't make that determination now, we don't have the documentation.
The veterinarian's office is
There
not
is a
listed.
dog grooming place right across the street.
But they're not doing surgery and other things and
Okay,
overnight stays.
I'm looking forward to you helping me.
Yeah, just get the laws together, the codes together, and you can discuss it. Like I said, we don't have it right here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, we'd like to sell this place.
Yeah,
I understand.
Seems difficult. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else have a comment? If not, I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel and negotiations. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you for explaining.
No problem, you got it.
Congrats, Paul.
Appreciate it.